Welcome, everybody. Thanks, guys, for joining us. I know it's during lunchtime, so I appreciate it. It's really good to see everyone here. My name is Seth Ladd. I work on the Dart team. And this is an Ask Us Anything session. So this session only works if you guys get up and ask questions. You can yell. There's also a mic here, and we'll try to repeat. But seriously, it's going to be really boring if you don't ask questions. This is your chance to throw the good questions our way. We have members from all different aspects of the Dart team. So hopefully, guys will hit us with some interesting ones and get a good conversation going. A couple just quick logistics. Anders is passing out the Buzzword bingo cards if you guys want to play along. See if you can ask questions to get them to say some of these favorite phrases from around the office. And we have some fun swag back at the booth. If you get a bingo, bring it down to the Google booth, and we'll give you something special there. Also, we're having a fun happy hour tonight at between 6 and 8 with the Dart and the Angular teams, free food, drinks, and some more swag. And it's at Hollywood Cafe, which is right attached to this venue. So you don't have to go very far at all. Hope to see you guys there. Just come and grab a ticket and the directions and time slip right here from us right after this or at the Google booth. And we really invite everyone to just come down and chat with us and hang out and have some drinks with us. Okay, cool. So with that, I guess we'll get started. I've got a couple questions prepared here, but again, hopefully you guys will ask some. But I think it makes sense for us to introduce the team here. Again, for the Dart project, we've got language and libraries and editor and tools, integration with Chromium and the virtual machine. So lots of good stuff going on. The team's really big. So let me have some of the leads and the team members here introduce themselves. Dan, can you start?
Sure. My name's Dan Grove. I work on the Dart team out of Seattle. And I spend most of my time working on user-level libraries and the package manager.
I have my own mic.
Oh,
wow, that's wonderful. So I'm Kasper Lund. I work on the Dart language team, and I'm the tech lead for the Dart to JS compilation, where we translate Dart to efficient JavaScript.
So, hi, I'm Florian Loitsch, and I've been working on the core libraries and the asynchronous libraries, all the libraries that are shipped with the Dart VM. I've been working on them for the last year.
Hi, I'm Steve Messick from the Portland office. I've been working on Dart Editor.
Hello, my name is Søren Gjesse. I'm from the Aarhus office, and my main task has been working on the Dart IO library.
I'm Lars Bak. I usually make sure they don't fight.
Have your own mic.
Oh, I can do it in stereo now.
Yoink. You were saying?
Thank you. Maybe we should start with some questions.
Okay, we all know Lars. Again, does anyone want to yell out a good question for us? What are you guys curious about? Don't be shy. Or I'm going to ask them questions. Yes, all right. Okay, so the question is, how good is Dart with testing?
Oh, me. We're really good at it. But we've actually spent a huge amount of time on this because for us, being able to test is really the key to maintaining velocity in our own code base. We have a unit test library. We've also worked with the Angular team. They have the Karma library available. And we do a bunch of in-browser testing as well. It's really key to us to be able to keep our tree green and to be able to commit to our tree with confidence. And that makes us spend a lot of time on this problem.
One thing that might be worth adding is that we see a lot of the community packages come with good unit tests. So we've done something right there to support that from the get-go. And people are using that to make themselves and others confident in the quality of the packages that they ship.
I should probably also mention that we've been working with some continuous integration as a service partners, Drone.io and CodeShip are two that I can think of, that have formal Dart support baked in. So the typical workflow, you push one of your pub packages or Dart apps from GitHub, and then that triggers a build on these CI services, and that runs all the unit tests. And we also have a headless version of Chrome, I think called Content Shell. Mm-hmm. So you can run all of your HTML tests in a headless version of Chromium. Thanks for the question. Yes?
Would it be a good idea to use Dart and Apache Cordova Phonegap environments?
Okay, so the question was, would it be a good idea to use Dart in a Apache Cordova Phonegap environment? Who wants to take this one? Okay.
Phonegap.
Okay. So So as far as Cordova goes, yeah, there's no problem at all using Dart with Phonegap or Cordova. It works perfectly fine. So from that perspective, it compiles to JavaScript. So you're going to see a JavaScript app that can then access those APIs just like any other JavaScript app would be. As far as the Apache side goes, I don't know.
So I think Cordova is the open source version of Phonegap.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Guys, any? Yeah. Cool.
So so in combination with Apache, we have the basic IO library in Dart. So you can, if you want to use it together with Apache, you can place your Dart server behind an Apache server so that you can actually talk to it. And that is something that we're also going to continue working on, like having good integration for web servers in the backend. So if you kind of look in the future, you'll see some even better ways of actually running Dart in an Apache environment.
Thank you. Question? Yes.
Will we ultimately get to a point where the Dart VM is everywhere? Or is this
Yes.
Let me just repeat the question. The question was, will we ultimately get to a point where the Dart VM is everywhere?
It's hard to tell. We don't control the whole industry, but it is clear that without focus on performance, it should be sort of compelling to take it. So what the other browser vendors will do, we don't know. But I guarantee you, when the Dart VM shows up in Chrome and it runs your application twice as fast, it's certainly sort of food for thought for the other browser vendors. I hope that will trigger them to take it. It's completely open source, and I actually don't see any downside in taking it.
Okay, great. Yes. Hi.
Currently, the focus is on the client side. Do you plan to have some focus on server side for mobile development?
Great. So the question was, currently the focus is on the client side. Do we have any plans to focus on the server side? And then you said, and mobile. Okay, great. Well, we'll start with Søren, I think, who has some thoughts there.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we have kind of a basic IO libraries in Dart already, so that you can make a simple HTTP server, and there are already kind of in our package manager there are third-party packages for doing more with IO, and it's definitely something we will focus upon also in the future, because we think that's important that you have the ability to have a kind of share the code between the client and the server, so that you, based on what you're doing, you can actually change where code runs, whether it runs in the client or in the server. Maybe you have some client that's not really capable of running that much code, or maybe you have clients that are disconnected, so you actually need the whole app in the client as well. So this is something that we're focusing very much upon. Yes. So and for mobile, I don't know. So at the moment, of course, we have the web client framework, which of course also works inside the browser on the phone. Yeah.
Running natively on Android, for example?
I get it. So currently we're focused on web applications, but it's clear that moving forward there shouldn't be any issue in getting it running on mobile platforms. I think it's just a matter of time. It's important for us to focus on one area to make sure we are successful there before spreading it. Doing too much at the same time, well, will kill the platform in my mind. So when we have a good traction on the website, we're already getting that, it seems, then we will look at pushing into other areas. But it has to make sense, right? So it's not because it's a new thing. We want to make sure that it solves real problems for developers.
Yeah, and just to add to that, last year we did or earlier this year we did an experiment of taking the Dart VM onto Android and then trying to bind it to the low-level primitives on Android. So, for instance, the GL surface, audio, accelerometer, that kind of stuff, and that worked just fine. So we have that experimental shell that we tried to create, and when the time is right, we'll see what else we want to do.
Did you forget to mention we have an ARM port already? So we can run on ARM-based systems already with the Dart VM, and it's fast.
One more question about the compilation to JavaScript. So I've seen benchmarks of how well it runs on V8, and I understand there's a lot of synergy between Dart and the V8 team. How well does it run on other JavaScript
I'll just repeat real quick. So the question was, how well does the generated JavaScript code perform on other browsers' JavaScript engines?
Well, I can take that one. So we pay attention to how well this code behaves on the other engines. It's a little bit of a moving target. All the engines are trying to improve their support for various different JavaScript patterns we might use. So we're working with mostly the V8 team, that is true, because we have good insights into how that engine works, and it's easy for us to profile and debug issues in there, and we learn a lot about generated code from that. But we are very focused on making sure that this runs really well in IE and Firefox as well as Safari and JSC. So the short answer is that we're keeping track of this, and we are paying attention to it. And sometimes we do have trade-offs where, like, doing it in one way works really well on V8, but doesn't work that well on Firefox. We're trying to pick the solutions that appear to be like the canonical way of doing it in JavaScript when there's doubt. But every now and then we do use tricks where we have to work around a performance issue in one of the browsers, and that goes for both V8 and Firefox. Long term, I think we want to publish some benchmarks. Basically, take Dart code, compile it to JavaScript with our compiler, and give this to the different JavaScript engine developers out there, and see if we can get them to help us out. I think they would be interested in making large apps written in Dart compiled to JavaScript run really efficiently. So,
one thing I would like to add is that the Dart project is completely open sourced. So the benchmarks we've been using are also available. So the browser vendors, other than ourselves, can take the benchmarks and try out the JS code and improve it as well. So hopefully they're also paying attention to our benchmark suites. So that over time it'll get better when it comes to executing Dart on a JS engine.
So I have a follow-on question for this. We've shown benchmarks during the keynote where sometimes the compiled output from Dart to JavaScript is a little bit faster than handwritten. And a question we always get from the community is, how could that possibly be? So can you just walk us through a little bit about what the compiler is doing? How can it generate faster code?
yeah, it's actually pretty simple. It doesn't mean that we can that JavaScript is faster than JavaScript, because that really makes no sense, right? But the kind of code you would write by hand in JavaScript doesn't necessarily include like inlining or redundant code elimination, things like that a compiler is good at doing, where humans have they struggle more. So what we're comparing is like very maintainable Dart code and very maintainable JavaScript code, and what the compiler emits may not be what you would write by hand. And this is why it becomes a little bit faster. We can eliminate certain things in the code. We can do a little bit of inlining. So we can help the Firefox JavaScript engine or V8 execute the code a little bit faster by doing ahead of time compilation and analysis and type inferencing, basically. So basically we just make the JavaScript code different from what you would write by hand, and we have a compiler in the loop there, so that makes it possible.
I just want to add that we have another advantage in that we actually worked on V8 before, so we have a really, really good idea of what JavaScript is easy to optimize for the engines themselves. And sometimes we produce code that you wouldn't even think of producing, because we just know that the JavaScript engines will then take this code and make really efficient JavaScript jitted code. So that gives us an additional small edge.
And the bottom line is that if you use Dart, right, you're not penalized for translating to JavaScript.
Yes. Oh, we'll come back to you. Yeah, go ahead.
For the time being, one Dart VM isn't everywhere. People will have to use the compiler to generate JavaScript.
Yeah.
Do you have already an integration for the build tools like Maven that can help put it as part of regular build?
So the question was, for the time being, people have to compile Dart to JavaScript, and do we have any integration with typical build tools that people might have, like in this audience, to help with that production process or production workflow? Okay, I'll give a fuzzy answer for that. Maybe. Well, I am aware of one community project that has some Maven integration. I don't know specifically. I can assume it's Dart to JS, but we could do some quick searches afterwards maybe and see what they are. I know our team isn't producing any direct plugins into the other build systems there are, but I'm hoping that the community will chip in here. I think, and also people build infrastructure a little bit different everywhere. So if we produce the command line tools with stable command line arguments, then it should be easy for them to integrate. Good question. Thank you. Yes.
So where does this put Dart against, say, Google Web Toolkit?
Okay, so where does this put Dart against Google Web Toolkit?
You're probably asking the wrong people. But I can in short mention that the language is much better. I think there's a big difference. We are trying to cater certainly to web development, where that when you in the development process do not have any lag time between you change the code and get up running. So this immediacy is really dear to us, and I think that's harder to do in Grid because you always have a tool in between the source code and running the program. So in that aspect, I think it's a more pleasant experience when you develop a Dart program. And what we heard from projects that are doing large-scale programming in Dart, they're really very happy with the turnaround time from you change the code till you try it out. So that's certainly one of them. I think also Dart the Dart programming language is more modern in that one example is it has optional typing. So you can do prototyping without types and add the static types as you get further along with your program. So that kind of flexibility is sort of cater really to people that want to experiment and prototype applications. And I think that makes programmers more productive. So that's it.
Okay, and then we'll get to you. Okay, go ahead.
Is it possible to write a library or a framework in Dart, compile it, and use it in the JavaScript world as a normal minified JavaScript library?
So the question is, can I take a normal Dart library, compile it down to JavaScript in such that I can use that in my otherwise existing JavaScript application? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so that is possible, and we haven't seen that many people like take a large Dart framework and compile it down to JavaScript and then use it from JavaScript exclusively. But we do have a way of doing an interrupt between JavaScript and Dart code, and it goes both ways. So you can call Dart code from JavaScript through that. So it is possible to take something, write it in Dart, and then basically compile to JavaScript and integrate it in existing JavaScript projects. So I think it might be a very good way of like slowly rolling Dart into your existing app. The ones of you who attended the keynote probably saw that the Blossom guys is actually sitting right behind you. Managed to actually do a transition to Dart over time, component by component, which is like very compelling if you have an existing code base and you want to start making use of Dart and benefiting from it, but you want to take it in small steps.
Yeah, just as a side note, while this is possible, I'm not sure that you would really want to do this. And there are a couple of examples of people that have frameworks available in both Dart and JavaScript, and in all cases they've chosen to build separate code bases because they're more idiomatic to use in different languages, for instance. So two examples of this are Angular. They had Angular.js, obviously, and they made a decision to build Angular.dart as a separate code base, and there was certainly a lot of debate about whether they should take an approach similar to the one you were talking about. Polymer is the second example. They also have a JS code base, and when we looked at it, we decided that we couldn't really get nice idiomatic Dart out of it, and we couldn't get idiomatic JavaScript out the other side. So at least in those cases, it's been worth it for the framework developers to develop the framework in parallel in Dart and JS.
So I think one recommendation, or sort of one view on it, is that if you have very fine-grained integration between the JavaScript and the Dart, it gets a little bit complicated because it's two different kinds of style of programs. Whereas if you have a component where you have a narrow interface to it, I think it's fine to write one in Dart and another one in JavaScript, and that'll work fine.
Okay.
Could you talk about one or two features that will be in the next release of Dart, and what will be this release?
Okay. The question was, can we talk about some upcoming features, one or two upcoming features in a potential future version of Dart?
A future thing that'll show up is the Chrome stable will have the Dart VM. Does that sound like a good thing to you?
There are some other future things coming,
yes,
right? Like
that's true.
Delayed loading of
yeah.
in JavaScript is a feature that we know a lot of customers care about. So they want the ability to hit a start page and then lazily pull in code as it's needed.
But I think we're just shipping 1.0 today, and we expect a big uptake in the use of Dart, and we will certainly spend a lot of time just handling feedback from you guys and making sure that we fix the issues, report as soon as possible, and then of course make it faster and smaller, which is always a goal. So I would take a step back and just make sure that what we have sent out will be refined and improved before we promise anything new by a few months.
Yeah. In terms of improvements, there are several improvements that we want to do in the core libraries. So especially the isolate library is currently really bare metal, the minimum that we could support in the short term. And we will add more features, make it more robust, faster, and so there are some libraries that work, are nice, are stable, but we will still add a little bit more features and make them better.
And as for the editor, we're going to have better integration for working with Dart code embedded in HTML fairly soon. We've started working on that. We've got a lot of work yet to do there. That'll include debugging and all of the cool editing features that you want. And we've got more work on the debugger coming, and there's just a ton of work we want to do to make editing better overall. Just rewriting some portions of the code that kind of evolved without actually knowing where we were going at the time. Now we know where we're going, and so we want to do some rewriting and fix up some long-standing bugs that my friend Florian here has pointed out over the years now.
And of course, the Angular Dart system and the Polymer system will turn into stable libraries that can be used for cool frameworks for building web apps.
That's a good segue into a common question we get from the community is there's two major emerging libraries, Angular, which a lot of us have heard about, and Polymer. That's a little bit newer, but it builds on web components. How do I make sense of these two things? How do I see them playing together? Can anyone talk about a Dart world with both of these libraries?
Yes. So it's definitely been a big question for people. And one way that we've been talking about it internally is that we imagine that Polymer is going to be producing a lot of UI elements. And Polymer is also polyfilling a bunch of upcoming web standards. Now, Angular is really an application framework. And so what we're imagining is that it's going to be very likely that people will build applications out of Angular that are consuming web components that are actually written as Polymer components. So I think these things are likely playing at different levels of the stack for quite a long time to come.
Question from the crowd. Yes? Will there be special mobile components in Polymer?
Yes. Those are coming, and mobile is a huge focus for the Polymer team. We were just sitting with them a week or two ago, going over their plans, and it's clear that this is something they're going to be caring a great deal about.
Yes.
So a question about the language and the packages that come with the language. So Java now is 18 years old and has a lot of very old packages that are pretty hard to cope with in terms of the evolution of the language. So Dart is brand new, so what are you doing right now to avoid being in the same situation in 18 years?
I like that question. So if I can summarize, Java's been around a long time and they don't really actually deprecate stuff. What is Dart doing where we actually have a nice clean house all the time? Is that basically what you're asking?
Yeah, basically it's brand new, but are we planning to make sure it's going to be a healthy language for a very long time?
So what are we doing to make it, planning to make it a healthy language and I'll say ecosystem for a long time?
I can take a shot at that. I used to work at Sun at Javasoft, so hopefully we have learned from the Java experience in Dart. So one thing I believe we have learned is that the Dart programming language is fairly simple and hopefully easy to pick up, and the libraries are also very simple. I don't know if you have looked at the Java library, how big it is. The Java libraries, they're huge, right? And they have been growing for all the years. We hope we can keep our system nimble because it has to run inside a web browser. And by having the POP package service infrastructure. People can make new versions or even redesign of certain things, and you can still keep the old stuff out there, but if it's not used anymore, nobody cares. So instead of shipping the transitive closure of everything in the SDK, we have carved it up so that the SDK currently has a small set of libraries, and the rest will live out in the cloud, basically. Does that make sense?
Question from the audience. Yeah.
Are there any Google projects which are planning to jump on Dart for production anytime soon?
Are there any Google projects that are planning to jump on Dart anytime soon that we can talk about? Sorry.
Yeah, so the answer again is yes. In fact, there are a couple of Google properties that are in production today using Dart. So, Google Elections was rewritten last year in Dart. There are several ads projects, and these are not necessarily consumer visible, but believe me, they're very important to Google, and those have been rewritten in Dart. There are a number of other internal projects that are in the process of spinning up. I can't talk about them yet, but yeah, Dart is already in production at Google on a pretty good size scale.
I should probably add that at the very early stages, we knew everyone inside Google using Dart. It's now coming to the point where people contact us. We didn't know. They're like, hey, yeah, we've been using this Dart system for a while. Like, oh, great. So I think that's really cool for us to see that people are finding it on their own and using it. Okay, yes?
Yeah, at some points, Dart is currently 2 times faster than JavaScript. How much more room for improvement is there?
How much more room for improvement in performance, I think you're specifically talking about on the VM, is there for Dart?
Well, long term, we have to get faster than Java, of course. Well, it will take a while, but I don't think it's unrealistic to do that. Kasper?
Yeah, what we see right now is basically that we have around a factor of 2 on some benchmarks. These are benchmarks that have been tuned for a while in V8 as well. Generally, what we see is when we scale up the applications, we go from something that looks like a benchmark to something that's a little bit bigger, like, say, the Dart2JS compiler written in Dart. The difference is much larger. And there's several reasons for that. One is that Dart is a little bit simpler design than JavaScript when it comes to the object layout. So objects are not required to be expanded with new properties on the fly in Dart. So it's much easier for us to allocate them at the right size, and that keeps them small. In JavaScript, they tend to have extra fields and stuff in there so they can grow on demand. And that alone really gives us less memory pressure, and it really helps for large apps. And there are other things in the platform that just makes it easier to write high-performance application code, not just benchmarks. So we generally find that it's easier to predict the performance of a Dart app than a JavaScript app. There are less performance pitfalls you can fall into. So the benchmarks, it might be, it's a challenge for us to do better than V8. It's going fine, I would say. But for real apps, it's somewhat easier, actually, to do a good job at making them run really fast. So a factor of 2 in benchmarks is a good starting point. I think we can do even better. Yeah. But for real apps, I think you'll see an even bigger speed up.
I just want to qualify my statement from before. When you compare languages like Java and Dart, an interesting part is basic types. You know, in Dart you have doubles and ints and so on. And so when you do a JVM for Java, you know exactly what the layout of the objects will be. And if you do a double computation, you don't have to allocate objects to store the result because you have space for it in the fields labeled a double. In Dart, it's sort of different. You have to do way more optimizations to handle these basic types. So for certain kinds of sort of matrix computation and so on, we will always be at a disadvantage compared to Java. But for ordinary object-oriented programs where you're calling abstraction and you're calling out, I think we can do it just as well as Java.
We see some indications that on mobile, the difference between Dart and JavaScript is even larger. Mm-hmm. It's still early days for that, but it looks very promising.
So I think it's too early to put a a final glass ceiling on the performance of Dart. We still have some interesting ideas how to make it much faster, and we expect that to happen over the next 5 years, really push the performance on several fronts.
Yeah, so the question is, the Dart to JavaScript compiler, is it tested against various browsers like IE and Firefox, and how mature is it?
I can take that, yeah. So we are testing it against modern browsers. That includes Firefox and IE, Safari. So when we do that on every check-in we do, so we need to know how it behaves in those browsers.
What versions of IE?
It's a 9 and upwards. So we target the modern browsers. So there are older versions of IE that are much harder to support, and it feels important to us to focus on like the next wave of browsers, basically the modern ones, to not essentially make the platform suffer from like supporting very, very old browsers. So we are supporting a selection of all the modern browsers there. So it runs across the mobile and the desktop web. But we do track how well it performs and how well it conforms to the implementation specification on Firefox and IE. When it comes to maturity, the Dart to JS, the compiler that translates from Dart to JavaScript, is a fairly mature compiler. We've been optimizing it for a while, and I think at our booth we've shown some performance graphs that shows how it's evolved over time. And I would say that it's not just performance that's improved; it's also like the stability and compatibility of it. And like, we're seeing people inside the company and outside using this tool every day to like basically produce code that they deploy to real users. So it's certainly in a very usable state. We'll continue to improve it, of course, but we're at a good point right now.
I just wanted to add that there's also the difference between the code that is generated by Dart to JavaScript and the actual libraries, which have to be mapped from so Firefox, Safari, and so on. They all have a DOM implementation that's a little bit different, and there you will probably never run into difficulties with the code that Dart to JavaScript generates. But if you have problems, it will be at that layer, and if you see them, just report them and we will fix them. But normally, our tests are green. So.
Yes.
Would Dart be suitable for creating games in Webgl, using Webgl?
I like that question. Is Dart suitable for creating games in Webgl? We should probably say what Webgl is for those who don't know. Anyone want to take the question?
You should take it.
Okay, good.
You're the game guy.
WebGL is a 3D library like OpenGL, but accessible in the browser. So it allows you to write code that can run on the GPU. We have seen a lot of 2D games being built with Dart. In fact, one of the libraries we showed earlier was StageXL. It's a port of the Flash libraries, which is a really robust library for creating 2D animations. Some of those can be GPU accelerated as well. I'm aware of other libraries like 3.js has been ported to Dart, so it's 3.dart, and that's been called the jQuery for WebGL. So it makes it pretty accessible to developers there. Not necessarily great for games, but good for experimenting with 3D. I'm aware of other libraries called, one is Spectre, which is a high-level scene manipulation library in Dart. In fact, that's a really cool library because not only does it give you the high-level primitives for manipulating 3D scenes, but we're experimenting what it means to actually write a Polymer or web component front end to Spectre, which is your high-level scene-oriented library. So imagine creating, using custom elements in the DOM to construct your 3D scene, sort of like SVG for WebGL in a sense. So I think a lot of the work is being done from the community at that level. I'm not aware of any production shipping games built in WebGL, but Dart itself exposes all of the browser APIs, so Web Audio API, WebSockets, WebGL, all those core libraries you need for games are accessible to you. Yes?
What is the strategy for de-supporting old browser versions? Or how long are you going to support IE9?
The question is, how long are we going to support IE9?
So we actually did think about this early on, and we put a policy in place that mirrors, it basically mirrors Google's policy around Google Apps. And so that actually means that we'll be thinking soon about when to deprecate IE9. We're watching the uptake numbers as IE11 auto updates on a bunch of machines. The Google Apps policy has historically been to support the last 2 versions of IE9 and then tip of other browsers. Last 2 versions of IE and then tip of other browsers, and that's essentially what we're going to be doing. And I have noticed the IE9 numbers are plummeting now that Microsoft is auto-updating IE9.
Yeah, I would just to add, I would expect that all browsers moving forward will do auto-updating to make sure they fix security problems in their browsers. So what Chrome did early on, I think just has shown it works. And so that question about how old are you still supporting IE9, I think people should always have the most modern browser running on the machine. So I hope that trend will move forward, and so we can rely on a new, faster JavaScript engines and more secure browsers.
So we've just got a minute left. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, in the back. So if I can repeat, do we see anything that we can do in Dart that is not possible in JavaScript?
Yes.
Okay.
So we clearly have designed Dart so we can translate it to JavaScript. And we made some compromises, but there's one thing where it's not as flexible. In the Dart language support, isolates is a way of running concurrent units in the system. That's hard to do when you translate to JavaScript because there's no multi-threading going on in the browser unless you use worker threads, and they have their own limitations. So that's one area where we haven't done a lot, but we'll change that in the future, hopefully. So isolates is one case. Anything else?
So there are a couple of corner cases where it is possible to tell the difference between running natively on the Dart VM and running compiled to JavaScript. We don't intend to add any more of that, so it is important for us to be compatible with browsers out there today that have or have not gotten the Dart VM upgrade. So I think your question is, are we going to add more to Dart that's going to make it hard to keep that compatibility going? And I think the short answer is no. We're not going to add anything to Dart that is going to not work when compiled to JavaScript.
I can mention one thing we took out so we could translate to JavaScript, and that's non-local returns, which is used very much in Smalltalk, which is a cool way of bailing out of recursion. The only way to do that in JavaScript is by using exceptions, and they're way too slow. So we took it out of the language.
Okay, there was one other hand there. Did you have a question?
I come from a pure Java world, and I haven't done much in JavaScript yet, but what I took from the talk yesterday was that I should definitely take a look at it in the future, and also at AngularJS, and maybe that's not the best idea, but to directly look at Dart and Angular Dart.
I can completely agree with you. That's the best plan of action. So
yeah. The question was, I'm a server-side developer in Java. I use Java a lot, but I'm hearing a lot that I should learn JavaScript for the front end. Some frameworks like AngularJS make it pretty appealing. But then I saw this Dart thing, and now I'm like, maybe I should actually use Dart and Angular Dart. We wholeheartedly agree.
So let me just comment a little bit on that. I think what you will find if you try out Dart is very similar to Java and Spirit. So you have classes and instance methods and so on. So I think you will find it very easy to do that transition to Dart. I tried the transition to JavaScript many years ago. It's interesting and very different. I'm probably not the right answer to tell you if it's wrong to go in that direction, but you should talk to other developers that have tried.
What I really like, and what I'm hearing in your question underneath, though, is should I be building for the modern web? Should I try building for the HTML5 browser? And I think the answer is yes. Whatever it takes for you to get there, that's awesome. I think Dart's going to really help you out, but it's really cool to see server-side developers think now, oh, I can actually now build for the client, do technologies like this. So I guess we can keep going until we get kicked out unless anyone is waiting for the next one.
We have one question over here.
Okay, sorry, where? In the back, yes.
I heard in another session from the Angular guy that they're now also looking at ECMAScript 6, and you see a lot of things there that's going on, like they are going to add classes, annotations, and other stuff. So JavaScript is going in the future also more to the Java way. So more things that are being solved by Dart in JavaScript will also be solved by ECMAScript 6 itself. So yeah, I'm also really curious about the facts, how you guys look to the fact of how JavaScript is evolving.
So if I could summarize really quickly, it sounds like JavaScript is evolving. ES6, the next version of JavaScript, is adding a lot of new features, things like classes. What do we think about this evolution of JavaScript?
Well, you can wait for that if you want to, but you can also try out Dart. It's there today. So you can always discuss about people that are planning new things and coming into the standards, but as far as I can see, right, if you really want classes and a structured way of doing web applications, you have to look at Dart and not at JavaScript. ES6 is not out yet, I believe. It's not. So it's very hard to speculate what kind of features you'll get in JavaScript in the future. But of course, people are screaming about they want more structure. So I understand why the ECMAScript committee is adding these features so people can get familiar concepts into the language. Any other comments?
I think that covers it.
And I think we're out of time.
Wow.
Okay.
So thank you, everyone, very much. We'll be hanging around at the Google booth. Come by and get your tickets for tonight's happy hour. And if you did get a bingo, come and see us and come pick up your swag. And thanks, everyone, for the questions. Appreciate it.